It's 9:03. We'll start the office hours meeting. Our weekly meeting, we're being recorded, et cetera, et cetera. Feel free to mute yourself, hide yourself, participate anonymously if you like. So a couple things. One, the advisory committee meeting, we're waiting to confirm attendance on some people who will help with the presentations. So we're looking at March 11th or 12th or March 19th. Those are the 3 days that are kind of in the running at the moment. So we'll let you know as soon as we get confirmation on kind of what's the best day for the people who would be participating in that, and let you know it would be in the morning. Probably 2 hours meeting, 9:30 to 11:30, 10 to 12, something like that. So we'll let you know about that. On the schedule, if you have nothing better to do tonight, you might be interested. The Devon Superfund site is having a remediation advisory board meeting. Kind of fun to check in on them. You can go, if you just Google, let's see, how did I do this? I have the wrong things there. If you just Google Devon's RAB, Devon's RAB, it will get you, pretty much some of the choices, EPA, Devon Superfund site. Click there. 6:30 to 8. It runs on the Teams platform.
You started sharing your screen, Paul, but it looks like you haven't finished.
Zoom is giving me problems.
Looks like you're frozen, Paul.
You're in charge, Liz.
Okay, what do we want to do?
Oh, you're muted.
Mute myself.
And any tips on frozen screens with Zoom? I have this really nice Apple desktop that's only a year or two old, but I can't use it because the screen keeps freezing.
Yeah, does anyone discern a pattern of why it happens? It just seems random.
I think for me, we have a couple more people in the house that may be having other meetings at the same time. So I think it's bandwidth for me. So I'm going to try shutting down some of the other things that are going on, at least on my computer. But I think for me, it's bandwidth. And hopefully I'm not causing my wife's meetings to crash too. That wouldn't be good. I haven't heard any screaming. So the Devon's RAB, where they'll be talking among other things about PFAS out there, but always kind of interesting, especially if you're not directly involved in some of these sites, to kind of drop in, see how the work is going, see how other people are doing it, look at especially if you're distanced from it and you don't have any personal stake in it. It's kind of interesting to watch from how people run public meetings, doing it virtually, the type of questions that come up. Sadly, that's kind of what I'm doing for fun these days. Dropping in on other people's advisory committee meetings. But that's the benefit of having all of this done remotely. You can do it. It's relatively easy. So the other thing that I'll bring up before Larry does, because I'm sure he couldn't help himself, is that Liz and Luke and I have been asked to join a Brownfields tax credit working group that's being organized by the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, involving the Department of Revenue as well. So we've been invited to participate to take a look at potential kind of how the tax credit is working and consider kind of changes, revisions, updates, improvements, et cetera. So I mentioned Larry because Larry was at the first listening session that the working group held yesterday. And I think my understanding is there'll be a couple more listening sessions and some meetings of the working group, and then looking forward to some recommendations coming out in the timing I heard yesterday was in, I think, a couple months. So we'll see how that goes.
So
Well,
this, go
I
ahead.
just have to say that one of the suggestions that sort of got floated was that maybe DEP take over the program of making the decisions on this, which is something I don't think any of us on our side of the call thought was a real good idea for just a whole bunch of reasons. But we were all very supportive of DEP making the decisions on the technical piece regarding the MCP.
Yeah, we certainly appreciated the kind of, comments that did come across as support for DEP yesterday. I certainly, I mean, we want to be very careful in kind of not. We don't want to grab the program. We don't want to do what is, DOR's area of expertise, and running the program. I think we can help out and kind of provide some suggestions, certainly help kind of give some of the comments that are coming in from the LSP community and the development community on how the MCP works to give some background and context for those because as kind of Larry, you heard yesterday, there's a wide range of understanding on the side of ANF and DOR and others that we're participating on kind of how all of this works. And as an arm of DEP, the LSP community, is part of all of this. There was a comment yesterday about LSPs actually being an arm or a part of an extension of the department, which we found a little.
We found it amusing, didn't we?
Well, it does show that there's a wide range of kind of understanding about how all of this works. So it's good that I think it's good that we have a seat at the table. We're not driving this bus, but we'll be participating over the next few weeks to a couple of months in it.
I never learned boxing exactly, but I heard it was bad to lead with my chin.
Yeah. The big takeaway from the meeting was that the Lieutenant Governor very much wants this thing to get under control and to have the brownfield tax credits doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think you heard that from everybody at the meeting, that there was across the board wide support for the tax credit and implementing it as the legislature kind of intended it, and that there's a consensus that it has been very successful. So and certainly hearing from the Lieutenant Governor very strongly that she is interested in making sure that it continues to be effective.
Yep.
So we'll see how that goes. More later, I guess.
So these listening sessions public or no closed?
Elliot, I as I said, DEP is not driving the bus. Where we were invited within the last week to the first one. So I don't know the details about how they are being set up, arranged, and all of that.
Okay.
And I don't have any invitations for any subsequent ones yet, so I expect that they'll come in the future. Okay.
So I'll wait to hear back from you.
I'm trying not to get people's hopes up that DEP is there and we're we're, we have well, 3 seats at the table, but we're
Larry,
not.
are you a regular participant?
No, Elliot, I was only there with the NAOP group. So
Okay.
Ned and I were there for NAOP, and I haven't been invited to any others, and I don't anticipate going to any others.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly the working group is internal to state government, and then to the extent that there will be additional listening sessions, which my understanding is that there will be, I'm not sure who exactly will that will involve.
Well,
We'll see.
I'm glad that DOR is taking the comments seriously, it seems. So that's as much as I can hope for. That's good.
No, and the charge of the working group includes looking at and considering potential statutory changes as well.
Oh,
So it's kind of broad to what would be needed to make sure that the tax credit works effectively. So those are the 3 things that I had this morning. Do you guys have any questions? Anything you want to talk about? Any exciting news?
Paul, you mentioned the advisory committee meeting coming up. You may have said this before, but do you have a sense of agenda for the meeting, some topics?
Liz, are we ready to kind of talk about details about the agenda? Or is that dependent somewhat on availability? Liz, you're muted.
The topics we have so far are, we're going to resume the discussion that we started having about the makeup of the advisory committee. And I think we'll have sort of a straw proposal for changes we might want to suggest. And so we'll probably present that, maybe allow a little time for discussion, but that will just sort of be the first of laying that out. We're also going to be posting the results of the lab audit that we began a few years ago. So we will be doing a presentation on those results. And one other item besides general updates is to talk about some upcoming grant opportunities. So I think that is probably, would make up a couple of hours of meeting time. And we think in this format, that's probably all that people could really tolerate. So that's what we're planning on.
Thank you.
Okay, any other things? Any DP staff want to pass along any news, exciting, interesting site work? No. Okay, you're being quiet. It's been a long week, I
A
guess.
long year, Paul.
Yeah, and we're not even 2 full months into it yet. I know we're coming up on the anniversary. Matt, yes.
I was just going to say again, if there was a gap conversation, a shout out to Gail McCarthy, who contacted the property manager and me, and almost immediately we got our access and have conducted our indoor air sampling at the residential property. It was
Yay!
amazingly lightning fast, and everyone is greatly appreciative. Thank you very much, DEP.
May have an
I'm glad
offer they couldn't refuse.
Well, it's good to see that things can happen without the explicit strong arming or kind of taking enforcement actions.
There might be some implicit in there as the general manager of the consulting company said, when you get a call from the department and it's an attorney, it tends to like move things along.
Our attorneys are just effective in communicating, and there's certainly no implication of anything other than wanting to make sure that the regulations work as they're intended. But glad it worked out well. And and I mean, that's why the regulations are there and the process is there to request DEP insistence in things, because most of the time it will work well, but sometimes having the department also asking for the access and helping out kind of greases the wheels a little bit. It certainly shows that this is a serious situation where in this case the potential for exposure to contaminated indoor air, and the department does want that investigation to move ahead. So
DEP helped us out years ago. It was an IRA site. It was a building that was next to an oil terminal that the basements reeked like oil, and the owner wouldn't let us in, and DEP emergency response threatened, I don't know if this is true or not, but they said, if you don't let us in, then you could be named as a responsible party. So I don't know if that's real or just a strategy, but is that true under the regs or the law that they could be named? Yeah, Gerard shake.
well, I think Luke will like hit my mute button if I go too far astray on the legal side of things. But given the kind of broad joint and several liability and who are responsible parties and who has liability, one of the core things is ownership. And so, there is potential for somebody being identified as a responsible party receiving an NOR because they are the owners of contaminated property. So well, it's sometimes just clarifying kind of what the rules are that we all have to play by is enough to help people decide to be cooperative.
Yeah, I remember it's written into the regulations in 172 or 173, whatever that provision is, where PRPs are able to come to the department and request our assistance to get access. There's a whole sort of menu of options that the department can choose from. And if I remember right, and I don't have my regulations open, one of them is sort of similar to what you were referring to.
Luke, this is Matt. I had understood years ago that this flowed from the Clean Water Act and the creating or maintaining a source of pollution. So if owners did not let people who were claiming responsibility and were willing to clean up do that, then the owner then would be maintaining a source of pollution and therefore responsible. That was the argument given to me.
And that's why I like to come to these meetings. I learn something every time. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, any other good news stories? That was a good one. Any other ways we've helped the LSP community out? Yes, Bill, how you doing, Bill?
Hi, Paul. Paul, you discussed a little bit, and I'm not a brownfield tax credit guy, but I've heard some strategies out there. And one of the strategies is to hit the ROS for a site and then seek the 50% tax credits. And then come in later and close it out with an activity and use limitation. So that's one strategy I've heard kind of in the background here, and it just never made sense to me. Doesn't make me feel comfortable or anything like that. So I don't know if any of my colleagues have any comments on that. So basically they're taking advantage of the ROS for the 50% tax credit, getting that reimbursement, and then closing the site out with an activity and use limitation at the end, which is really only 25%, I believe. I think I said that right.
Yeah, in the midst of the deafening silence, I think I would point out that that's kind of getting deep into the weeds of specific examples, and DEP kind of is on the sideline for that. I'm sure that throughout the public comment process on the regs and during these listening sessions and in the discussions with DOR, a lot of examples of examples of issues kind of on both sides of situations that DOR thinks may be kind of expanding or pushing kind of the limits of the tax credits, and examples certainly that we heard of that people believe that the pace or the way by which DOR is making decisions kind of inhibits the intent of the tax credits. Kind of, I think there are stories on both sides of those, and this probably isn't the forum for kind of airing those on either side. But to the, if hopefully if you have made comments on the tax credit, or if you know them, we can certainly, or have comments, we can certainly pass them along and kind of take all of that into account. But yeah, I think there are, as with any program that's been kind of in place for a couple decades, and in this case, it's one that has been running based on the statutory language and kind of the guidance from DOR. The regs that went out for public comment are the first attempt to kind of put more detail in the regulation to provide more clarity and more structure to it. But it's been running for a number of years, for a couple of decades now. And it's probably not surprising that there are kind of fuzziness and gray areas and things on across the board that probably would benefit from additional clarity.
Thank you.
Oh, Bill, you scamp you.
What was that?
Scam, you're described as a scam. So, but back to the good news stories. Any good news? We can talk about COVID for a little, because that's also some good news. The interesting thing this week for us is all of state government received an email from the governor, basically kind of outlining in broad brushstrokes what the future of work is going to mean for us, and really giving some clarity to the DEP employees and everybody else that, as we return back to work in some form or another into the future, that reinforcing what we already suspected, that it's not going to look like what had been there in the past. That if one of the good things to come out of the past year, as long as the past year has been, is demonstration that we can do a lot of the work remotely, and that will result in changes and more flexibility as we go back. So the details, of course, are still to be worked out, but it's going to be interesting as we go back. Again, my personal bet is September for the start of the new school year. But at that point, we are going to have a lot more flexibility of staff being able to work from home a couple of days, or 3 days a week, or 4 days a week. And it will be interesting to see how all of this is managed and worked out. So we know kind of where everybody is going to be, not to keep track of people, but just if we only have a certain number of cubicles, and you assume a work at home rate of 25% or something on any given day, you have to make sure that some days you don't end up with most of your staff coming in and looking for seats and cubicles that don't exist, that have already been taken. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this is worked out. But
So
the
Paul, one
flexibility-
of the questions over the recent period has been difficulty in state regulatory agencies finding qualified personnel. And
Mhm.
in some fora, the concern that women have to make career choices in childbearing years, if you will. I speak carefully here. But in any event, that the increased telework option will make it easier for the department to find good people and to retain people who might otherwise feel like they had to choose between work and family.
I'm going to put in my plug for working for state government here. Is obviously it's a choice that I made a long time ago and stuck with. But working for the state does, I believe offers a number of benefits compared to working in the private sector. But there are costs, of course. We don't get paid as much, I hear. Don't really know because I never really explored that, but I hear that. But we have a variety of good benefits. I think overall, state government and certainly DEP has been very good at certainly promoting and encouraging women. I find that all of my bosses, or many of my bosses, have been women. There's still a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do, certainly to make our workforce more diverse, and particularly to make our management more diverse. But it is a good place to work, and has provided some flexibility, more flexibility, I think, than the private sector. Having said that, having this as well, this is something that the private sector has been a little bit ahead of state government on, I think, offering more flexible work from home policies. So I think this will help keep us in the running and keep us as an option for everybody, certainly not just for women, for men who want to spend more time at home, who don't want the commute. I think we have benefits in that we have regional offices, so it's not necessarily, working for DEP does not mean you have to have a 2-hour commute into Boston. People can work in our regional offices and live further out in areas that are more affordable and still have a reasonable commute. Working from home will only help that. And whether it's women who are caring for children or men who are caring for children, this will help. So if you know of people entering their working stages in their life, really DEP is a good alternative for people. Speaking at the end of my career, it helped me as I was helping care for my children, and I think it's a good place to work in that regard. So recommend people.
Absolutely.
Yes, Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Paul. The question I have is, it sounds awesome. What's a reasonable time period when you send an email to a staffer at DEP? 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, when you should have a return receipt or at least a response? And I mean, basically, how are we keeping people accountable, at DEP in this process? Because I'm sure my colleagues will say, I've sent out emails and I haven't had any responses, or there haven't been any responses in 48, 72 hours. And I try to be pleasant, and I usually put in the header, are you around? And so sometimes it's a little disappointing. I don't get a response back. And of course, we're out here by ourselves, Paul, trying to deal with this. So sometimes we need a little assistance from the department. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, on what's, I guess the question is, what's a reasonable time period to wait for a DEP staffer to return an email? I would say 24 hours is reasonable. Would you agree? And
Well, first, whatever my answer is going to be, it's going to damn myself. Because I get more emails often than I can keep up with, and I do find, and I apologize to all of you, that there are some things that get buried and they get lost until somebody asks again, and I try to keep up, and I think a lot of the staff probably end up in the same way, try to keep up, but having given the blanket apology, the staff are, we are in the process of probably rolling out within the next month the last of the DEP issued laptops. So there is a technology issue as we go along, and that we're solving that, so that the response, I will leave it as it should be the same as before COVID. And some things may have to be passed. Some things maybe the response is delayed because it gets passed on to other people and it takes some time to answer it. Sometimes it gets lost, but all of them should be kind of as soon as reasonably possible. Yes, David, help me get out of this.
I was going to say, I am almost entirely getting super fast response. So no offense, Bill, maybe it's how happy you are when you approach your regulator. But I've been dealing with a bunch of IRA conditions, whether that's kind of roadside spills or PFAS in people's drinking water, and getting tremendously responsive communication almost across the board. And Paul, I'm glad you fell on your sword on that one. The only person who actually delayed a reply to me recently was you. So, but you got back to me. No, I'm finding folks are super responsive, and a lot of folks I think have gotten new DEP issued work cell phones, and they're very quick to say, especially for spill response folks, like, hey, call me on this. Let's talk about this. And folks are being very available, and I'll say in a pretty wide set of work hours, so that if there's a question or a comment, folks are being generally responsive. So I would, not to contradict Bill too hard, but I've had very good feedback from folks in wayside cleanup across the board.
Let me support Dave on that too, because Dave is right. It's concerning our IRA activities. We are getting responses. We are communicating. So you're correct, Dave. On the IRAs, you're right on. We've had good communication. It's just kind of some, I don't want to say side comments, but some important questions, that I think should be addressed by. That's the emergency staff person you talk, emergency department there, the ER. They're fantastic. So heads up, good job, Paul, on that side, definitely.
Well, yeah,
And it also raises a question, Paul. I mean, I've had the same experience, but yes, same as Dave, the ER people just say, call me on my ER cell. And so it raises the question for the other staffers. I mean, I called one of my clients last week and at their office number and heard a toddler crying in the background with a dog barking. And he said, oh, no, yeah, our office numbers just roll over to our home. We can set it. We turn it on in the morning and turn it off at night. And it was just question, is this something the department could investigate? That, you post your numbers, you call people, you could actually talk to them in addition to sending email.
Yeah, so that in the grand scheme of the technology available to us, oddly enough, the telephones are the weakest link here. And so unfortunately, for the most part, the office telephones cannot be set to forward to cells. We can forward internally. There are, and I'm not sure of the details of any of this, but it's pretty much all of the office phones in each of the regions and in Boston. They're working on older technology. They are not kind of voice over IP, more modern sort of thing where it's very easy to forward things. I know that because I am a manager, my phone has a button to forward to cell. I can also say that it doesn't work consistently. So that is problematic, but most of our phones cannot forward to cell phone. You could probably imagine, so that means calling in and picking up your messages on some basis, and that's how most people are doing it. Most people, if you get calls from them, the ER staff have cell phone, DEP issued cell phones. Management has DEP issued cell phones. For the record, mine is a Galaxy S5. And for the cell phone folks out there, Samsung is probably up to what, an S20 now? So there aren't a lot of DEP issued cell phones. So when you hear from DEP staff, often they may in fact be calling from their personal phones and cell phones. And that is a problem, because that's a lot to ask for people, and to be getting calls back from LSPs, to their personal cell phone. And some people feel uncomfortable kind of doing that. I think there is a move to issue more cell phones. That has costs that have to be paid, and arrangements that have to be made that aren't as easy as one would think. We can't just go to Verizon and give them our credit card and do that. And then we've been trying things like using Google Voice, which I try to use from my computer, and in other workarounds. So that I think the cell phone thing is the weakest link here. Emails are probably the best, because the computers are getting out.
Excuse me.
So, and there was the other thing I wanted to say is, yes, I agree. The ER staff have been incredible throughout all of this. I've been in my basement, very safe. They have been going out and responding the way that they have been, and they have always been and continue to be responsive to all of those, not just the drinking water and the indoor air, but the road spills and all of that. They have been a constant throughout all of this.
And I'll just say, on behalf of the legal office, I don't get a lot of cold calls from outside the agency. But when I do, and when my staff do, we treat those as being the most important calls, trying to respond to the people outside of the agency, outside of state government. Those are the people who we are being paid to serve. And so that is certainly a message that I would want to get to my staff and the Office of General Counsel.
Yeah, I think some questions when they do come in, I think the problem of kind of the staff person getting the question, turning around and thinking, oh, this may have implications for something else, and I need to check with, my boss or somebody in Boston or somebody else on what the correct answer is. And then you get into the, trying to connect and trying to have those conversations and get the right answer back to you. And sometimes kind of all of that takes longer than one would want.
Absolutely. And for me, you'll get a lawyerly answer that really contains no information whatsoever. So, but you will hear from me. I hope within the end of the next business day. That's usually the rule that I try to follow, no later than that.
Paul, this is Linda. I have a question.
Hey, Linda, how are you doing?
We're good, thanks. I wondered whether the governor's communication to you folks included any mention of the change in the state of emergency, because that's a technical point that triggers a lot of what he's able to do.
So first, I'm going to fess up that the governor's message went directly to spam on my computer. So I caught up to it a little bit late, but I do not believe that it got into that level of detail. This was more to the state employees about what the future of work is going to look like, and didn't really have
Thank you.
specific timeframes. As far as state of emergency aspects of it, and we are coming up on the anniversary of those executive orders with the state of emergency. From DEP's perspective, or wayside cleanup's perspective, I think, a lot of kind of what we initially did in response to the pandemic and the early shutdowns in April, a lot of that was reversed by the executive orders that came out at the end of June of last year, kind of reestablishing more normal timelines. So there are a lot of things that the executive orders in the state of emergency still cover. I think for our operations, we're generally back to normal, certainly for timelines and deadlines and expectations for how the site work will continue, with the overarching caveat that is written in the Q&As and the guidance that is there on the COVID page, that we recognize that there still may be unique circumstances out there where COVID is preventing people from getting work done, and give us a call, give the DRD a call, talk to the folks, and we can work through that. So I all of that to say, I haven't been paying that much attention to the kind of technical, the specific state of emergency announcements, if there have been. Partly because it doesn't affect my life that much. Until the governor opens the doors and said, "Okay, welcome back. Come back into Boston." That's what I'm waiting for. I think the DEP staff that got the governor's message, and the secretary also had a follow-up. Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs. There wasn't anything specific to state of emergency, right? Or was there anything more interesting in that would be of interest to the general public? Yeah.
Hey, Paul. Okay. Paul, I don't, that's Rob Lucci. I don't think there was anything in there that I recall either, but I can at least fill in, answer or provide some perspective from the Boston office. I handle a lot of compliance fee inquiries, and I don't have a DEP cell phone, but I pretty much, I guess to answer Bill's question, I pretty much respond to inquiries, him included, pretty regularly. For me, generally within an hour, but my general rule of thumb is 24 hours for our staff. We still maintain a phone line in the Boston office that is entirely voicemail, and we try to return calls regarding billing or fees or whatever within one business day. And somebody checks the voicemails, but I think as I think you said, email works best for us. And one other plug, I'll say, as you know, we did get some, there's been a bigger rollout of laptops for the staff, and that's been great. I did finally get mine, and have been transitioning over to the DEP issued laptop, and it's been, works better. It's a little glitchy here and there, but it works better. In fact, right this minute, I have my new laptop and my old personal laptop running, just because screen issues. So I have 4 screens in front of me, in back of my personal cell phone that I'm using for the Zoom call. So a lot of technology here, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think the work from remote working works for the Bureau pretty well. We've gone almost entirely electronic with all kinds of documents, scanning, PDFs. So that's been good. So that's our perspective. I think, we try to return calls pretty quickly, and I think email works best. just because it's pretty much on all the time. And I think for the agency, from the Bureau's perspective, I always find that something in writing is often better than something over the phone, because it can be, you know, an LSP can take an email and forward it to their client and say, here's what DEP says. I may get myself into trouble there with some of the legal staff, but you know, we like to try to make determinations and be definitive and, you know, give good clarity. So.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, at some point, it would be nice if they replace our phone systems with one of the voice over IP systems. My wife's company, the calls can come in and it will go right to their computer. So wherever you are with your laptop, the telephone calls would come in there, which would be really cool. But that would mean replacing our entire system.
That's what we have. I have no real telephone. This is my telephone.
Yeah.
You dial on the.
Yeah,
Although it's linked to your contact list,
yeah.
And so you like click on the name and it dials. But I don't have a real phone.
Yeah, I do go into the office once a week to do the mail, which is declining the amount of physical mail that we get, which is good. And I was sitting at my desk, which has my desktop, which had to be jury-rigged with external, camera and a microphone and all of that, because the desktop doesn't come with that. And I was trying to be able to call somebody, and I was trying to get all of this to work on the desktop computer, and because I'm so used to doing it with my home computer now, where I have it all set up. So I use my computer to call out, make telephone calls. And it completely skipped my mind that here I am sitting at my desk and I literally have a telephone sitting right there that I could pick up and call somebody. But instead I was trying to make it work on the computer because that's what I had been doing for the past 8 months. So you forget what that big block of plastic is that sits there. That was embarrassing. Okay, well, 9:51. Anybody have any other questions? If you have any good ideas for how we should be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic, let me know.
To that, Paul, I understand that the trending social media thing to do is on the anniversary of the emergency declaration to post a photo of what you were doing on that day a year ago, which I guess is March 10th for Massachusetts. I reside in New Hampshire, so it's March 13th for us. But I guess that's the thing, is to post a picture of where you were a year ago.
Okay, well, we can do that. So that week, whatever, what does calendar say? Let's see.
Larry, I think we were preparing comments to the last set of DOR regs back then.
That's right.
Yeah, you
never ends.
The draft working.
Pandemic of regulation.
I bet we were all asking when the 2019 MCP updates were going to be coming out too.
Yeah.
Well, that would be good if the advisory committee worked out to be the 11th or 12th. We could at the end of that we could have a little show and tell, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, that would be pictures of where you were or descriptions of what you were doing then would be good. What you look like then.
It's only a year ago, Paul. Of course, yeah. Some of us have more hair than we did a year ago.
Yeah, I think for people that have hair, that perhaps is the biggest difference. Yeah, it hasn't changed for me, but
okay, I'm thinking more facial hair.
Yeah, even that there are rules about my facial hair that pandemic or no have to be paid attention to, abided by. Okay, so we'll see you this time next week, which is what, the 4th. The 4th? Yeah. Okay, so that's, yes, we'll still be able to do this.
4th, March 4th.
March 4th. Yeah, that
March
is
4th is some day.
March 4th is what?
A good
No, it's
command
May,
to
I'm
March
thinking May
4th,
before.
March 4th into the new era.
March, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm
March
thinking May
4th.
4th. I think it's Star Wars Day, and then Pi Day, of course, is the 14th.
But no, that's a couple months later. May 4th is the big day.
What are
Right,
the Ides of
exactly,
March?
exactly.
What is
Yeah.
that, the
Yeah,
19th?
but Pi Day is the 14th,
When is the Ides of March?
15th.
15th.
15th of
15th.
March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonder, do you know that?
So
I don't remember much anymore.
So March 4th is the annual MCLE Environmental Land Use and Energy Law Conference for those lawyers and others who are interested in that sort of thing. I'm sure reservations are still available.
Yeah.
So that's my afternoon, but the morning I'll be free. So see you on March 4th.
So long.
Have a good week.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Paul.